Go ahead and judge me for laughing, but first decide what you would have seen from my chair. My name is Serena Bellamy. I was 37, and I directed corporate sponsorship events for a living. Reading a room was not a talent I claimed. It was how I paid our mortgage. So when my former boyfriend pushed my husband Nathan face first into his own birthday cake, I saw a foolish prank between two men who had been friends since college. Nathan did not shout. He did not swing. He lifted his head slowly, cream on his eyelashes, and looked at every guest before he looked at me. I laughed harder because his silence seemed to prove what Luca had said about him for years. I believed the room was finally seeing the weak man I had learned to tolerate. Then Nathan straightened the ruined place card in front of his plate and reached for the microphone. I had dated Luca Moretti first. People always treated that fact like the beginning of a scandal, but it was only history until we turned it into something else. I was 25 when I met him at a hotel opening in Chicago. He had arrived without the presentation cards he was supposed to bring, talked the printer into staying open, and returned with coffee for the whole team as if the delay had been part of the entertainment. Luca could make failure look like a story worth attending. For 11 months, I mistook that gift for reliability. He forgot dinner reservations, borrowed money he returned in pieces, and once disappeared for 2 days because a friend had offered him a last-minute trip to Miami. When he came back, he brought me a bracelet from the airport and described the sunset until I almost apologized for being angry. That was Luca. He never fixed the damage. He changed the lighting around it. Nathan was his best friend and the person who usually cleaned up afterward. He picked Luca up when his car was towed. He found replacements when Luca missed a rehearsal. He knew which stories were funny because enough time had passed and which ones still had unpaid invoices attached to them. At first, I thought Nathan was simply the quiet man who stood beside the interesting one. The night I finally ended things with Luca, Nathan drove me home. Luca had promised to attend my mother's retirement dinner, then accepted a paid hosting job at a nightclub instead. I sat in Nathan's car holding a paper box with 2 untouched slices of lemon cake while rain moved down the windshield. Nathan did not tell me Luca was a fool. He only asked whether I wanted a life where every important date had to compete with a better offer. That question stayed. Luca and I broke up. Nathan kept his distance for 6 months, which I respected then and later used as proof that he had always wanted me. When he finally asked me to dinner, he arrived early. He had checked the parking situation. He remembered that I hated tables near service doors. Nothing about him sparkled, but nothing disappeared either. For years, that steadiness felt like love. After late events, Nathan would wait for me at an all-night diner near the river. We shared 1 plate of fries, and he let me describe every small disaster until the room emptied around us. He never rushed me. He kept packets of the mint tea I liked in his coat because the diner only served black tea. Once, during a snowstorm, we sat there until 3 in the morning while buses stopped running. Nathan folded a paper placemat into a crooked house and wrote our names over the door. I kept it in my desk after we married. The floor was there too, only smaller. When I cried, Nathan looked for the task hidden inside the feeling. If I said work was crushing me, he opened my calendar. If I said I felt lonely, he suggested a weekend and booked it before asking where I wanted to go. He loved by removing problems. It took me years to understand that being efficiently cared for could still feel like being unseen. Northlight events began at our dining table. Luca brought the ideas. Nathan brought everything that kept the ideas from catching fire. They built corporate launches, charity dinners, and private celebrations for people who expected beauty without ever seeing the work behind it. Luca became the public creative director. Nathan became managing owner and chief operating officer, a title Luca mocked because it sounded like a man married to a calculator. I joined Northlight 4 years later as director of partnerships. That was supposed to be temporary, but I was good at it. I knew where to seat a nervous donor when a client needed flattery and when a sponsor needed numbers. Luca made a room excited. I made it profitable. Nathan made sure we could use the room again next year. The 3 of us worked because each of us supplied what the others lacked. At least that was the sentence I used. Luca never fully left our personal lives. He came to Sunday dinners. He spent Christmas Eve at our house when he was between girlfriends. Nathan gave a speech at his sister's wedding. My mother still introduced him as the charming ex who had accidentally led me to the right man. Everyone laughed. Nathan used to laugh too. Then the jokes changed. It began after Northlight won the Bellwether Hotel's contract. Luca had designed the presentation, and I had spent 3 months building the relationship. Nathan had negotiated the insurance terms, staffing plan, and vendor guarantees. At the celebration, Luca raised his glass and said Nathan's greatest creative contribution was making sure the fire exits had correct signs. The table laughed. I did too. Nathan smiled and straightened the place card in front of him. That was one of his habits. Crooked cards bothered him. Folded menus bothered him. Anything designed to tell a person where they belonged had to be exact. On the drive home, he asked whether the joke worked because it was funny or because Luca had said it. His voice was soft, almost curious. I told him not to turn one toast into an audit. Luca joked about everyone, and Nathan knew that better than anyone. He asked whether Luca joked about me that way in front of clients. I said I could handle it if he did. Nathan nodded once. He did not argue. I mistook that for the absence of an answer. Around the same time, he began asking clients to send renewal questions directly to him. I saw his name appearing on calls that used to belong to me. When I asked why, he said Bellwether wanted continuity in the contract review. I told him continuity was my job. He said relationships were mine, but obligations belonged to the company. It sounded territorial. I told Marissa Cole that Nathan was pulling everything closer because he could feel Luca and me becoming the visible center of Northlight. Marissa handled public relations for our largest events. She had built a career by knowing which version of a story would survive contact with strangers. She told me serious men often confused control with protection because protection sounded better. I liked that sentence enough to repeat it. Luca liked it too. He began calling Nathan my seatbelt. Useful in a crash, irritating on every normal road. The first time he said it, we were reviewing a casino launch in the Glass House, Northlight's converted warehouse venue. Nathan was on a ladder adjusting a projector mount because a contractor had installed it 2 inches off-center. Luca watched him and said some men climbed ladders because nobody wanted them on stage. I laughed. Nathan kept working. Later, he asked if I wanted him at the creative reviews anymore. I heard self-pity and told him he did not need an engraved invitation to participate in his own company. He said participation was different from volunteering to be the punchline. I told him he was becoming sensitive because Luca was finally getting the recognition he deserved. Nathan looked at me for a long second, then returned to the loose projector bracket. He tightened it until the image stopped shaking. That should have looked like patience. To me, it looked like retreat. Luca's attention changed after that. He started sending me old photos from the year we dated. Nothing intimate. A picture of us holding umbrellas outside a music festival. A blurred shot of me dancing on a hotel terrace. He would add a line about how fearless I used to be. At first, I answered with a laughing symbol. Then I began answering with memories. Nathan did not ask to see my phone. He did something worse. He stopped reaching for me when it lit up. There had been a real distance between us before Luca stepped into it. Nathan worked late even when he was home. He could sit beside me on the sofa and answer 6 emails without seeing that I had changed clothes twice for dinner. On our 9th anniversary, he gave me a leather planner with my initials pressed into the cover. It was beautiful, expensive, and completely wrong. I had spent a month sending him links to a small coastal inn. When I said the planner felt like a gift for an employee, he apologized and offered to book the inn. That was Nathan. Even his apology arrived as a reservation. Luca heard about it from Marissa and sent a bottle of the wine we used to drink when we had no money. The note said some women needed memories, not schedules. I placed the bottle on our kitchen counter where Nathan could see it. He asked who sent it, though the name was on the card. I told him Luca remembered what mattered to me. Nathan said Luca remembered symbols because other people handled the cost of his real choices. That sounded jealous, and jealousy was the first heat I had seen from my husband in months. I wanted more. I told him perhaps Luca understood that a woman could not live inside a spreadsheet. Nathan picked up the bottle, read the label, and set it back in the exact center of the counter. Then he asked if that was how I saw our marriage. I said I saw a man who had stopped trying because he believed being dependable made him impossible to leave. His face changed, not with anger. Something simpler. Sadness made him look younger. For one breath, I remembered the diner and the paper house. Then my phone lit up with another message from Luca, and I turned it over before Nathan could read the screen. The movement closed whatever had opened. 2 weeks later, Luca missed a payment to a lighting vendor. It was not the first time. He blamed an invoice mix-up and told the staff Nathan enjoyed rescuing him because it gave operations people a reason to exist. Nathan paid the vendor that afternoon, so a hospital fundraiser would not lose its equipment. Luca called him predictable. I called him controlling. Neither of us called him the man who had just protected 40 employees from a cancelled event. The idea for Vivid House started in Luca's car after a sponsor dinner. He said Northlight had become too careful. Every proposal passed through Nathan's risk sheets until the excitement had been measured out of it. Luca believed clients were buying my relationships and his imagination while Nathan kept the profit because his name was on the boring documents. He wanted to build something lighter, smaller. Ours. I asked what he meant by ours. He said I knew. That answer should have bothered me. Instead, it made the inside of the car feel warmer. Over the next month, I helped him shape Vivid House. I suggested names, pricing, and the order in which we should approach clients after Luca left Northlight. I never downloaded a client list. I did not need to. I had built most of those relationships myself. Bellwether, Arden Health, the Keene Foundation. I knew the decision makers, their anniversaries, and which assistants actually controlled the calendars. Luca said they would follow me. I believed him because I needed that to be true for reasons that had little to do with business. Nathan noticed changes. Of course he did. He noticed when one folder moved half an inch. He asked why I had scheduled 3 private lunches with Northlight clients without entering notes in the system. I told him trust did not require surveillance. He said company meetings required records, whether the director was his wife or not. I said that sentence explained why our marriage felt like employment. He stopped beside my desk. For a moment, his hand rested on the old leather planner he had given me. He asked whether I still wanted to be married to him. Not whether I loved him. Not whether I was unhappy. He wanted a yes or no, a box checked before the next meeting. I told him people were not contract options. He said that was not an answer. I looked toward the glass wall of my office. Luca was outside, telling a story to 2 junior designers. They were laughing before he reached the end. I told Nathan I wanted a husband who fought for the room instead of quietly organizing it. He removed his hand from the planner and said he understood. I thought I had finally made him afraid. After that, his calm became almost insulting. He changed the company's security system and told everyone it was part of a scheduled upgrade. Client contracts moved into a permission-controlled archive. He asked finance to copy him on expenses over $5,000. Luca said Nathan was building a little kingdom because he knew the interesting people were preparing to leave. I watched Nathan sit with Claire Henson, Bellwether's regional president, in the glass house one morning. There were no presentation boards, no flowers. Only coffee, a yellow folder, and Nathan's plain black notebook. When I asked what they discussed, he said renewal language. I told Luca that Nathan was trying to trap Bellwether before we announced Vivid House. Luca said frightened men locked doors. What neither of us said was that Claire had requested the meeting. The jokes grew harsher as Nathan grew quieter. At a staff lunch, Luca handed him a plastic crown labeled King of Spreadsheets. At an industry mixer, he introduced Nathan as the man who made sure creative people had enough napkins. I laughed because the alternative was admitting the jokes had begun to sound less like humor and more like permission. One evening, I found a junior coordinator named Eli crying in the loading corridor. Luca had blamed him for a missing stage panel in front of a client. I knew the panel had been removed because Luca changed the design after the installation deadline. Eli wiped his face when he saw me and said he could handle it. Through the open service door, I heard Luca telling the client that young staff needed pressure or they became soft. His laugh followed. It was the same laugh he used after calling Nathan a seatbelt. For a few seconds, the pattern stood in front of me without decoration. Luca did not only joke with people he loved, he found the quietest person in a room and made the room help him. I could have walked back inside and corrected him. Instead, I told Eli to update the incident notes and stop taking feedback personally. Then I closed the service door because guests were arriving. Nathan's birthday gave me a way to prove that our private tension was smaller than everyone thought. He was turning 40. He wanted dinner at home with 12 people. I decided that was exactly the kind of small, cautious plan that had made him disappear inside his own life. I booked the glass house for 70 guests. I told myself it was generous. Nathan had built Northlight. Clients, staff, and old friends should celebrate him. More honestly, I wanted a room where Luca could shine beside him. I wanted to compare them under professional lights and have other people confirm what I had begun to believe. Luca offered to plan the entertainment. He called it a friendly roast. Nathan asked for one thing: no roast. We were standing in the empty venue while staff tested warm lights against the brick walls. He ran one finger along a row of place cards and corrected the one bearing his name. He said he did not want to spend his birthday pretending disrespect was affection. I told him refusing a few jokes would make the room more uncomfortable than the jokes themselves. He asked if his comfort mattered anywhere in that calculation. I said birthdays were not private property and people wanted to celebrate him in their own way. Nathan looked at the card again. Then he said I could still cancel the roast. I heard a demand. I did not hear the final offer inside it. Marissa was less enthusiastic than I expected. She approved the guest list but declined to help Luca prepare slides. When I asked why, she said a client's birthday was not the place to settle a marriage argument. I reminded her Nathan was not a client. She answered that the cameras would not know the difference. 2 days later, her replies became shorter. On the morning of the party, she sent a message saying she had a migraine and would not attend. I decided she had become afraid of Nathan's influence. Luca became bolder. During planning sessions, he sat too close and spoke about Vivid House as if its doors were already open. He showed me a loft across town with white walls and steel windows. The lease required a deposit neither of us wanted to discuss. He said the first Bellwether payment would cover it. I reminded him Bellwether had not agreed to move. He said Claire trusted me, not a logo. Then he kissed me. It was brief. No romance, no music, only his hand against the side of my face and the smell of paint from the empty loft. I stepped back, but I did not leave. Lucas said he had wondered for 12 years whether I chose Nathan because I loved him or because I was tired of being surprised. I said choosing safety did not mean choosing weakness. He smiled and asked whether I still believed that. I did not answer. Staying was an answer. At home, Nathan was sitting at the dining table with place cards from the birthday party arranged in alphabetical order. He had asked staff to bring them because several client titles were wrong. The old paper house from our diner years lay beside his notebook. I had not seen it outside my desk in years. He asked where I had been. I said the glasshouse team needed help. He named the loft address. My hand tightened around my keys. Nathan did not ask who was there. He said a Northlight vendor had received a request to quote equipment for Vivid House and had copied him because the specifications matched our confidential event plans. I told him vendors talked and ambitious people were allowed to explore opportunities. He asked whether my opportunity included Luca. I said his obsession with Luca had become embarrassing. That accusation was easy because it carried one piece of truth. Nathan had spent years comparing himself to a louder man while pretending comparison was beneath him. He said he had compared himself, and it had made him colder than he should have been. He admitted that he had managed our life when he should have participated in it. He could not refute that part. Then he asked me to tell him the truth before the party. One chance. One clean answer. I told him the truth was that I had lived for years beside a man who thought paying bills was intimacy. I said Luca made me feel visible, and Nathan only looked closely when he feared losing control. He folded the paper house once along its old crease. He did not defend himself. I took his silence as surrender. The day of the party, I wore red because Luca said Nathan preferred me in colors that disappeared. The glass house looked better than it had for any client. Gold lights washed the brick. A jazz trio played near the loading doors. The tables were set with dark blue linen and narrow white candles. At the center of Nathan's table sat a wide chocolate cake covered in pale cream with a thin gold line around the edge. The decorator had placed a small sugar house on top because I mentioned the diner story during planning. Nathan saw it when we entered. His eyes stayed on it longer than I expected. For 1 second, I wanted to tell Luca to cancel the roast. Then Claire Henson crossed the room to greet Nathan before she greeted me. 2 keen Foundation directors followed. Staff members who usually surrounded Luca were asking Nathan about their schedules for the next month. It felt coordinated. It made me angry. I went looking for Luca. He was near the bar with a glass in his hand, telling a group that the birthday boy had probably prepared an emergency seating chart in case anyone had fun. They laughed when they saw me. Luca kissed my cheek close enough to be noticed. I let him. Nathan watched from across the room. He did not react. He only moved his place card until it aligned with the edge of his plate. Dinner passed in a warm blur. I gave a speech about Nathan's steadiness. It sounded kind, but I made steadiness seem like a condition other people had survived. Luca applauded loudest. Then he took the microphone. His first stories were harmless. Nathan labeling food in the college refrigerator. Nathan bringing printed directions to a road trip. People laughed because those things were true. Luca moved to Northlight and showed a photograph of Nathan crouched beneath a stage repairing cables while Luca stood above him speaking to a client. He said every king needed a man under the floorboards. The laughter thinned. Nathan stayed seated. Luca called him the company's emergency contact, human seatbelt, and full-time cleaner of other men's messes. He said Nathan had built a career from being useful to people brave enough to live. I laughed. Too loudly. Several faces turned toward me. I lifted my glass and told Nathan it was only a roast. The cameras caught that. Luca looked pleased. He moved behind Nathan's chair and placed both hands on his shoulders. Nathan's jaw tightened once. Luca asked the room what happened when a man spent his whole life preventing disasters. Then he answered that eventually everyone stopped believing he could cause one. Nathan reached for the microphone, but Luca lifted it away. That small movement changed the room. I saw it. I chose not to stop it. Luca turned to me and asked whether I had ever wondered what my life would have been like if I had chosen a man instead of an insurance policy. The room went quiet enough for me to hear the jazz drummer set down a brush. Nathan looked at me. There was still time. I smiled and said at least insurance paid when something valuable was lost. Luca laughed first. I followed. A few guests made uncertain sounds because people often laugh when they cannot decide whether they have permission to leave. Luca leaned down beside Nathan and said his oldest friend had taken his girlfriend because Luca had been too wild to keep her. Now, according to him, Nathan could not even keep her interested. Nathan stood. Luca stepped back, surprised, then grinned when Nathan did nothing else. The cake sat between them. Pale cream. Gold edge. The little sugar house. Luca looked at me and said this was what he meant. Nathan would absorb anything. A joke. A betrayal. Another man's hand on his wife. He said weak men called fear dignity because dignity sounded better at dinner. Then he put one hand behind Nathan's neck and shoved him forward. Nathan's face struck the center of the cake. The sugar house snapped beneath his cheek. A candle rolled across the linen and fell to the floor. Nobody laughed. I did. The sound came out sharp and high. Once it started, I could not let it end small. I covered my mouth, looked at Luca, and laughed again. He pointed at Nathan and told me to look at the man I had chosen. He said he could humiliate his best friend in front of his staff, his clients, and his wife, and Nathan still would not do anything. I said Luca was right. Nathan lifted his head. Cream covered one side of his face. Chocolate crumbs clung to his collar. He placed both palms on the table and stood completely still. Then he took his napkin, wiped his eyes, and looked around the room. Not one person met my smile. Nathan picked up his place card. The corner had sunk into the crushed cake. He wiped it clean and set it square with the table. Then he held out his hand for the microphone. Luca gave it to him because Luca thought the performance belonged to him. Nathan thanked everyone for coming. His voice did not shake. He said the evening had answered the final question he needed answered, and he was grateful it had happened in front of the people affected by it. I set my glass down. My fingers stayed around the stem. Nathan asked the event technician to turn on the main screen. The Northlight logo appeared, followed by a simple list of client names. Bellwether Hotels, Arden Health, Keene Foundation, 6 others. Beside each name was one word: renewed. The dates went back 5 weeks. Claire Henson stood near the first table. She did not look at Luca when she said Bellwether had renewed with Northlight because Northlight had delivered the work. Relationships mattered, she said, but relationships did not belong to individual employees. It was a simple sentence. I had no answer that did not make me sound smaller. Nathan said Vivid House had approached every client on the screen using Northlight pricing, schedules, and vendor designs. He did not accuse me of stealing. He did not need to. He displayed the quote request sent from Luca's new address with my revisions still tracked in the margins. My name sat there in blue. The projector mount above us remained perfectly still. Nathan turned to Luca and asked if he remembered the lighting invoice he had called a mix-up. Then the private travel charged to Arden Health. Then the loft deposit he expected Bellwether to cover. Each item appeared with a date. Nothing dramatic. Amounts, approvals, corrections. Luca tried to interrupt. Nathan raised one finger, and for the first time in 12 years, Luca stopped talking when Nathan asked. Nathan explained that the charming creative director had not owned Northlight. Luca held a performance-based management contract and a profit share. Nathan had kept that arrangement private because clients liked the story of 2 college friends building a company together. He had also personally covered Luca's missed tax installments, guaranteed his apartment, and repaired every client relationship Luca damaged. The room did not turn on Luca all at once. It withdrew from him. A sponsor stepped away from the bar. One designer removed Luca's hand from the back of her chair. The jazz trio began packing their sheet music without being told. Nathan said Luca's management contract had ended at midnight under the misconduct clause approved by Northlight's outside board advisor. The venue, staff, equipment accounts, and client agreements remained with Northlight. Vivid House had a name, a loft application, and no signed business. Luca's smile disappeared before Nathan changed the screen. A message from Luca appeared. It had been sent to the man he hoped would finance Vivid House. Luca had written that Serena was useful because clients trusted her, and because taking Nathan's wife would finally prove which friend had always been stronger. Another line said he did not need to keep me after the launch. He only needed me long enough to make Nathan watch. The prospective investor had forwarded the conversation to Nathan and withdrawn. I read my name twice. Useful. Long enough. Luca said it was a joke taken out of context. Of course he did. Jokes were the rooms he hid inside after breaking something. Nathan looked at me then. He said he knew he had made our marriage feel managed. He knew his silence had become a wall, and that being a dependable husband had not made him an attentive one. He said those failures belonged to him. Then he looked at the crushed cake. He said my choices belonged to me. Nobody in the room could rescue me by pretending I had been seduced by a better man. They had watched me choose cruelty after being given a final way out. Luca handed the microphone to the technician and said I had pushed the Vivid House plan harder than he had. He said the client lunches were mine, the pricing notes were mine, and the kiss at the loft had been my decision too. Then he walked out through the loading door without waiting for me. Nathan said a separation agreement would be delivered to my temporary address on Monday. No one made a scene after that. Scenes need people willing to stand beside you. Claire left with the bellwether team. The keen directors thanked Nathan quietly. Staff members began clearing plates around me as if I were an empty chair. I reached for Marissa's name on my phone. My earlier message still showed unread. The cake remained on the table. One side was flattened, and the little sugar house had broken into 2 clean pieces. I moved into a furnished apartment above a pharmacy because Nathan had purchased our house before the marriage, and I agreed to leave while the separation terms were settled. The $48,000 I had placed into Vivid House stayed tied to a lease application Luca had signed with no refundable clause. Marissa stopped answering. My mother attended one dinner with Nathan, and the Northlight staff removed me from the group chat before sunrise. Luca moved to Tampa within 6 weeks, blocked my number, and listed himself online as an independent creative consultant. No events company would hire me to manage confidential partnerships after 9 clients received the same report with my tracked revisions attached. Nathan kept Northlight. He also kept the coldness I had spent years naming. At the final mediation, he arrived early, placed his folder square with the edge of the table, and spoke to me with the same calm that once made me feel safe and later made me feel invisible. He had won with the part of himself that helped ruin us. I still think about the choice I believed I had made between 2 men. Luca was excitement without shelter. Nathan was shelter with every window closed. I told myself keeping both of them turned toward me meant I could never be abandoned. One wanted to win me, and the other had already learnt to live without me. The cleaned place card arrived in a box of my belongings, its corner still stained with a thin line of gold frosting. I laughed when Luca put Nathan's face into the cake, and the room remembered which one of us had made the mess.